Hey, this is Zachlog the Great, and I am here tonight with my friend Chris.
Hello.
And we are joined tonight by author Matt Cochran.
Good evening.
And we are getting together tonight to talk about C.S. Lewis's poem On Being Human. Before we get to that, I did want to mention quickly, I don't know which platform you're watching this on, but wherever you happen to be watching this video, I am at the moment on at least two others. And so you can also find my videos. You can find my videos on YouTube, on BitChute, and on Odyssey. And I will put links to all three to all three platforms in the description of this. Subscribe on at least one other in case either I get kicked off or the platform disappears, as happened with VidMe a couple of years ago. Having said that, before we get to the poem, Matt, are there any books or anything of yours you wanted to tell people about?
Well, sure. I actually only have one book, and that was written a while ago. It's called As Though It Were Actually True, a Christian Apologetics Primer. I wrote that back when I was in seminary, and it's meant to be an introduction to apologetics, covering some of the philosophical, historical, and moral arguments for Christianity. So that's always available. I'm not exactly an unbiased source here, but I think it's a good read. And but you can catch my more recent stuff is you can catch me on my blog, the 96 Thesis, which is matthewcochran.net/blog, or on sometimes on the Federalist. I write for the Federalist occasionally as well.
So. I'm sorry. I'm laughing because I am probably one of the people who unintentionally helped make the Federalist comment section go away. I wasn't trying to, but I probably contributed to that.
In all honesty, it's kind of a weight off my shoulders because I couldn't help but read through the comments after getting something else posted. And I don't know that I've ever walked away edified from the comments that they were posted. If I was lucky, I could pick two or three that were at least worth talking about in a follow-up or something. But so honestly, when the comments went away, if that was your fault, thank you.
I'm not going to take exclusive credit for that. I mean, for one thing, I didn't want it to happen, but I was probably I may have been among the people who, whatever hit piece was citing to say, oh, look at all these horrible things they let people say over there. Anyway, but let's see. Introductions past. Matt has volunteered to read the poem for us tonight, so I am going to. Good. I'm going to go ahead and put that up on the screen, and we will, and he will read it for us. Where do we have it? That's it. Okay. So let me know when you guys see that.
All right, see it now.
Okay. So yeah, when you're ready.
All right. On Being Human by C.S. Lewis. Angelic minds, they say, by simple intelligence, behold the forms of nature, they discern, unerringly the archetypes, all the verities which mortals lack or indirectly learn. Transparent in primordial truth unvarying, pure earthness and right stonehood from their clear, high eminence are seen, unveiled, the seminal huge principles appear. The treeness of the tree they know, the meaning of arboreal life, how from the earth's salty lap the solar beam uplifts it, all the holiness enacted by leaves fall and rising sap. But never an angel knows the knife-edged severance of sun from shadow where the trees begin. The blessed cool at every pore caressing us. An angel has no skin. They see the form of air, but mortals breathing it drink the whole summer down into the breast. The lavish pinks, the field new mown, the ravishing, sea smells, the wood fire smoke that whispers rest. The tremor on the rippled pool of memory that from each smell in widening circles goes. The pleasure and the pang, can angels measure it? An angel has no nose. The nourishing of life and how it flourishes, on death and why they utterly know. But not the hill-born earthy spring, the dark cold bilberries, the ripe peach from the southern wall still hot. Full-bellied tankards foamy topped, the delicate half-lyric lamb, a new loaf's billowy curves, nor porridge nor the tingling taste of oranges. An angel has no nerves. Far richer they, I know the sense's witchery, guards us like air from heavens too big to see. Imminent death to man that barbed sublimity, and dazzling edge of beauty unsheathed would be. Yet here, within this tiny, charmed interior, this parlor of the brain, their maker shares, with living men, some secrets in a privacy, forever ours, not theirs.
Where are we? Okay, thank you. So, Chris, would you like to get us started?
Sure. So naturally, like I'm sort of the person that I'm like, okay, there's some stuff that we just can't know, and I try not to dwell too much on that stuff. So I haven't spent a lot of time like trying to work out the exact nature of angels and stuff. But this characterization of just sort of like discerning the truth just because they're in the like spiritual realm and they just see the truth for what it is. In a way, I find that kind of terrifying because some of them, despite being in that position, still turned away from God. So I'm not sure how to think about that exactly, but that was the first thing that sort of jumped out to me is like, wait, if they see things how they really are, how could that happen?
Well, I mean, it's it's kind of like I think it's from James. He says, "Oh, you believe in God. That's great. The devils believe in God and tremble." They they believe in God. They know him from a position much more direct than we do, but they made a choice. And I guess that's to attempt to reply directly to what you were saying. Like, it's not about it's not about knowledge. It's about a decision. It's about what choice you make. All of us have done things that we've known are like, this is stupid. This is wrong. I'm gonna regret this, and then we do it anyway. And so, I mean, their position in that regard must be somewhat different than ours, but apparently there is some resemblance too.
Yeah, in that respect, there's similarity there because, I mean, you can make the same thing with humans. You can read the Bible and look at the Israelites and say, they had God doing miracles right in front of them, repeatedly, but they still rebelled. Or people that actually saw Jesus, raising someone from the dead and deciding, oh, I'm going to kill him. And it's on one hand, it's like, oh, that's unfathomable. How could you do that? But they all managed to. And yeah, you look at, and then I look at my own life, and it's like, okay, yeah, maybe it wasn't quite in my face in exactly that way, but it's not like I haven't ignored things that really were in my face and just did it anyway. It's yeah, I think you're right. It's that much we have in common that we actually are capable of rebellion. And it's like, oh yeah, it doesn't make sense that they could, but frankly, it doesn't make sense that we would either. But but we do it anyway.
I think the big issue with me is I tend to fall on the side of like, well, if you know the right things, if you have the right knowledge, you're good. And I have to remind myself, no, it's also how you like live and like, how you love others. but I always want to go back to if I have the right knowledge. So having a being that has all the knowledge and still fails, like that just cuts against like the core of my nature.
And that's I think that's kind of interesting because I was about to bring up Plato and how this poem does match some or follow some of the Platonic theory, and then what you brought up is I couldn't point to exactly where he said this, but I think this is something that's from Socrates, where he basically he says that basically human evil is a result of ignorance, and if we knew if we understood, if we had all the information, we wouldn't do wicked things, which has never really been the Christian position, I don't think. That we could, because like like you pointed out, and was an entirely different. I wasn't thinking about that side of it at all, but the angels have a much more direct knowledge of all of this than us, and a noticeable number of them decided to choose ill, choose evil, and so the problem of a misguided will is not resolved. You can't educate someone in the sense of giving them more information out of sin. Although if someone is sinning and they know it and they want to stop, then there are things where education, where some things that we would or at least similar to education, where we can help someone figure out how to change things. That is one of the kind of along a similar line, but there still has, the first thing is the act of will, the decision, not the information.
Yeah, knowledge is a prerequisite in certain respects when it comes to those sorts of things, because if you're making a decision, it's on the basis of something. That's just the kind of beings that we are. We don't do things in a vacuum. It's kind of what it comes down to. But at the same time, there's more to it. And yeah, giving us all the knowledge in the world isn't going to help when the will itself is broken, when we're bent. And going into a different way. And that's where I think where the verse from James you quoted earlier comes in, where it's like, yeah, God exists. You have the knowledge. Well, great. Even the demons have that knowledge. It doesn't do them any good. But there's something beyond that, something that God has to fix for us, not something that if we knew enough, we would do it differently. Because again, it's one of those things. It makes sense. It feels like that should be true. But then you have all those empirical examples from the Bible where it's like, yeah, but they did the opposite. But they did the opposite. They did the opposite. And it makes me, again, a second guess. I was like, well, yeah, if I were in that position, would I really have done so much better than them as I think I would have done? And if I'm being fair, I say no, probably not.
And you said we don't make these choices in a vacuum. I did try making decisions in a vacuum once, but it was really cramped in there, and I couldn't think.
Really dusty too, yeah.
I'm sorry, that was. But to rewind a little bit to something I had mentioned earlier, one interesting thing about this poem and C.S. Lewis in general to me is there are definite traces of Platonic thinking in this. And he talks about where is it? The archetypes, the form of air, that these eternally existing basic realities, spiritual realities that everything here is a copy of. And C.S. Lewis refers to these kind of things occasionally. It's kind of interesting to me because there's at least two other people today that I follow who, they and I've never made a study of this enough to say much myself, but they kind of set up Platonism versus Aristotelianism, and the idea of a pre-existing the idea of is the reality the spiritual world that everything here is a reflection of, or is reality as best we can know it the physical world, and the best thing we can do is look closely at that and learn from that. And both Stefan Molyneux and Vox Day very much tend to go with the Aristotelian side, to the point of, I know at least Molyneux says basically like tyranny and corruption tends to come from this Platonic way of thinking, and I think Vox Day has said something kind of similar. And so it's, again, like I said, I've never studied this philosophy enough to follow the chains of logic, but it is interesting seeing people I respect on different sides of an argument.
Yeah, that's a long-standing debate in philosophy. I forget the name of it. There's this famous painting where it has a bunch of the Greek philosophers all standing together talking, and Plato and Aristotle are at the middle. And the picture is of Plato pointing up to the sky and Aristotle pointing down to the ground as they're arguing. And because they do have these two different approaches. And I don't know. I studied philosophy back in the day. My courses of study ended up taking me elsewhere before I really got that deeply into it. But I always thought of something where it's not as mutually exclusive as people often think it is. Because I mean, Molyneux and Vox Day are correct in that, yeah, you can look at things platonically and you get these big ideas that overshadow the practical realities of what you're doing around you, and can obscure a lot of things, cause a lot of problems. But the converse is true as well. You can have pragmatism where you have just these everyday practicalities distracting you from bigger things like truth and goodness and beauty and so forth. And as much as Vox Day craps on Plato a lot, he still talks about the good, the true, and the beautiful, in not exactly the same way, but that same trio that you find there. And I don't know, it's a little trite to say, oh yeah, they're both right, because they're not. They're both right in some ways. They're both wrong in some ways. But if you have, and it's kind of the paradox of the physical world. If all you have is a physical world, and it's disconnected from the world of forms or for any kind of higher spiritual reality, you end up with nihilism. You end up with we're just atoms in a vacuum, and they just take on different arrangements, and that's all there is to it. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just gonna say, I actually that reminds me, I actually made a video a couple months back talking about Stefan Molyneux, and when asked about like finding meaning in life, he's like, well, you don't really need, don't look for a big meaning, just be happy. And he said, like, and he gave examples of, well, when this is going on, are you worried about about the meaning of life? And when you're experiencing this, are you thinking about what does it all mean? I don't know if he was aware of this, but if I remember correctly, the examples, unfortunately, I don't know where this conversation is, so I can't like actually check notes or anything. But if I remember correctly, like all the examples he gave were physical pleasures, which there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, like, don't think about it too much. Just enjoy yourself physically is like almost the opposite of philosophy.
It is. He said something very different in lots of other videos. But.
Well, and I don't think he was. I don't know if he was doing that intentionally, but like, right. I mean, he did say, like, don't think about, don't try and worry about too much about what things mean. Just be happy. And like
Mhm.
I said, there is a defensible sense of what he said, but also like in this, without recapping the entire video, in the sense that like be happy in the sense of live your life, arrange your life in the way that best maximizes the chance of of long-term success, long-term happiness, long-term fulfillment, which actually is kind of a lot of the wisdom of the Bible.
Mhm.
That's not all of it, but there is a significant part that's like that. But at the same time, like no matter how much you do that, no matter how well you do that kind of thing, there are going to come times where it's things are going to go against you and you are going to be in pain, and those are the times when you need meaning, when you need when you need to have some kind of why that is not merely this kind of physical satisfaction.
Yeah. And even when things are going well, you need that too. It's at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, you can talk about happiness and fulfillment. Those are good things. We should talk about those, and yeah, by all means, pursue those in as much as we can. But when you have that, you reach that point where it's either fulfillment and happiness and joy. They reflect, either they reflect something higher, or they are themselves on the low end of things. You end up in the Tony Montana situation at the end of Scarface, where he's he's done all of that. He's gone after fulfillment and happiness and all of that, and he's sitting there. It's like, is this all there is? Is this it? And because pure fulfillment, pure happiness, only in that sense, in that lower physical sense, it's not fulfilling. It's not happy. It's not joyful. We're designed for more, and you can take any animal in the world, and they already do what Stephen Molyneux was talking about there. Is like, yeah, they're pursuing their best interests as best they can and not worrying about anything. But humans are the only ones you actually have to tell that to. Suggests that we have a part of our nature that depends on something more than just that.
At the same time, which is this is kind of the big phrase of this part of my YouTube channel. To get back to the poem, oh, by the way, the picture you're talking about, it's the School of Athens by Raphael.
Okay, that's fine.
Anyway, but to get back to the poem, at the same time, it is interesting. He says angels have this this direct knowledge of these realities. Angels can discern the archetypes, the forms. They see what these things are, but they don't have skin. An angel doesn't have skin. An angel has no nose. An angel has no nerves. And God has given to us, uniquely to us, the ability to experience these things in a different way. And God has given us, the blessing of a a fresh loaf of bread and a cold beer, and and stepping into the shade on a hot summer day and feeling actually, this is one thing that I can say quite I can testify to quite personally, because I like to go running a lot. I like to do distance running, and when you're running in the middle of the summer, and you see up ahead a tree over the road, and there's this patch of shade, like you. When you've been out there for like 20 minutes already and it's in the upper 70s, and you see that shade up ahead of you, there is a very real anticipation of reaching that, and so, and when you get there, it's it's a pleasure of its own, and so. But God has given us the ability to experience things this way. So I don't know if I had much of a point there.
Well, when I look at that, I always approach it as I'm a software engineer by trade. So that's kind of the analogy I look at. There's a difference between using the program, the experience of actually using whatever program it is, versus looking at the code and looking at the data in the database. And in a certain respect, if you're looking at the code and you're looking at the data in the debugger or in the database, and you have all that access to every single thing that's going on, you know exactly what that software is doing, way better than the user that you're trying to help, because something's going wrong. But it's a totally different experience than actually using the software. If you think in terms of video games, actually playing a game versus, oh yeah, I know exactly why this variable is this way, and I know the mechanics behind it, and I know how the code is working back there. It's different. It gives you more information, but it doesn't give you the same experience. It doesn't give you that same being part of it. And I think that's kind of how I see the angelic perspective in this poem. They see everything that's going on. They have X-ray vision, seeing every little detail that we can't get to, but they don't know what it's like being here. They don't know what it's like actually being here. And then at the end, you get that again. You get that paradox where it's like they're richer because of this. We're because we know the sense is witchery. We're tricked by our senses sometimes. We can't access the spiritual realm in the same way because of our senses, because we're in this material world. But then he kind of turns it around. It's like, yeah, but this is a good thing, because on the other hand, we have something that they don't, and God Himself shares that with us, that's just an amazing thing about the incarnation, where he doesn't take on the appearance of man like the Greek gods were doing all the time. He was actually born. He actually grew up. He cried and slept and wept and ate and all of these things. And God never became an angel. He didn't take on an angelic nature. He took on a human nature. And then you get those comments like in 1 Peter, where it's, these are things that angels long to look into. But it's a privacy. It's smaller. It's a tiny charmed interior, as Lewis puts it. But yeah, we have something that they don't, and we have a relationship with God in a way that they don't. Well,
and it's. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was finished.
Well, I was gonna say, it's almost definitional. Privacy is smaller, and privacy has to be smaller, and also, and Lewis doesn't talk about this here, but I just got done recording a poem by G.K. Chesterton, where among other things he talks about love of country, and that people, he says in that one, he concludes with they died to save their country, and they only saved the world. And nobody loves the world. Nobody loves the earth. We love our little part of it.
Yes.
We love the place where we grew up, and we love the place where our family is, and where we have planted this little nest of memories. And that also is something distinctly human. And that also is something that an angel wouldn't be able to intuitively understand, as he describes them here.
Yeah. No, that's true. You wouldn't even know what it meant to love the world or to love humanity if you didn't start with loving your family, or loving your congregation, or loving your community. There's this great part of the, I think it's in Brothers Karamazov, by Dostoevsky, where there's a woman who's giving confession, and she's talking about how she's trying to be basically a good liberal in that place and time, and I'm trying to love humanity, and I'm trying to love the world as a whole. But the more I do that, the more I find that I hate the people around me. The more I find that I actually hate the individuals, that God has actually put in my life. And there's just there's a connection there. You can't love the big stuff if you can't love the small stuff. If you don't learn how to, with again the details that you've been given, wherever God has placed you.
Yeah, well, even like the Lord's Prayer starts with our Father, bringing it into that close familial relationship.
Yeah, it's our and it's Father. Yeah, it's not exactly the same thing. That's a very there's a privacy there. There's privacy there. There's unity, but there's privacy too. It's again one of those interesting things about humanity, where we're individuals and social at the same time.
So, Chris, we haven't heard a ton from you in a little bit. Was there any other?
Yeah, so I've been enjoying listening to y'all, but also whenever conversations like this happen, I notice a lot of people talk about like all the things that are like pleasurable to feel and how great those are. But one of the weird things about human is we actually can enjoy the struggle. Like I think about like people that I know that are like into like bodybuilding or fitness. Whenever they're working out, they feel the pain and they love it because they know they're getting stronger. So as humans, like we can actually learn to love, things that are the opposite of pleasurable, because we have this concept of the more effort we put in, then the greater the result will be, whether that's, physically or even like mentally working on something, whether it's like coding a program, writing a book, or even just like raising a family. It's like we have this idea that yes, these things will take a lot of energy, they're going to be painful, but we can find value in that even before we actually see the results.
And yeah, and to go back to something I said earlier, like I said, I like to do distance running, and there's something like there's something I get out of it, like pushing your body as much as you can, and just can I go another mile? Can I how fast can I do this? And stretching yourself just physically. And there is even when it does hurt, even when you are sore or your joints are aching from this, there is a very real pleasure in that. And it's I can't think of another thing I do that replicates quite that same sense. But what was, let's see. It's also one other thing interesting when he talks about air and
Oh, is he frozen for you too?
Yeah, for me too.
in our can
you froze for a second there.
Okay. Yeah, I think we lost a lot of what you're just talking about there.
Okay.
I heard when he talks about air, and then it just froze.
Yeah.
Okay. So when he talks about air and the smells of summer and the tremor on the rippled pool of memory that from each smell in widening circles goes, and I've heard I remember see people talk about this, and I think in some psychology textbooks talk about how smells can kind of directly pull up memories in a way that a lot of other senses don't do quite as powerfully. And one thing for me, when I'm out during the summer and walking or driving past a particular spot, and I just smell honeysuckle from these patches beside the road, and it's a beautiful smell in itself, and also it brings back seeing that and smelling that as a little kid, and it's a surprisingly powerful experience sometimes, things like that.
Yeah, I think when it comes to smell and taste are both kind of interesting. It's easy to imagine what something looks like or what something sounds like, or at least I find those easy. But when it comes to smell and taste, those are the ones like I remember, but I can't like replay it in my head the way I could replay a song. So it's almost when you actually experience it again, it pulls back those older memories, just because there isn't another good way of doing that. There's no good way of remembering those sensations in the same way they can do with certain other senses.
Well, and the other thing with that is, sight and sound are the easiest ones to abstract from our bodies in a certain sense. I mean, right now, in a way, I see and hear you, but you're, 1,000 miles away from me or so. But smells, tastes, we cannot do. I can't smell whatever you're drinking, and if you had a chocolate bar there, there's no way I could taste it. And so there's they are the most directly connected, the most directly physical of our senses. They are the most you can imagine a ghost, you can imagine a disembodied spirit seeing or hearing something, but like tasting or smelling, that just seems weird. And so him focusing quite a bit on those, it's the very definite, the physicality of human beings. And one other thing, and I think you referred to this earlier, Matt, one other thing with the last stanza here, their maker shares with living men some secrets in a privacy forever ours, not theirs. And not only in the sense that he made it, and God is omniscient, and he in some sense knows, but I'm a Christian. I think God actually did see and smell and taste and feel with his own skin all of these things, and it's fascinating to contemplate that. It's fascinating to contemplate the idea that God was hungry, that God had sore legs from walking too much one day and really wanted a nice soft place to sit down. And that he did share these things with us. And it's that's something that Christians have that no other faith does in quite the same way.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing about Christianity, is it strongly affirms the goodness of the physical reality around us. Yes, things have gone wrong, but the fact that things exist, the fact that we have bodies, these things are inherently good. Where even, in the early church, when they tried to, create heresy saying, oh, well, Jesus was actually a spirit, like he only looked like he had a physical body, they had to stop that right away, because it's very easy to want to separate into, oh, spiritual good, physical bad.
Yeah, Gnosticism was one of the big heresies for a reason. Yeah. I'm sorry, go on. Yeah.
But with Jesus, we actually have a joining of the two together. So it's not physical bad. It's just, like, yeah, like there is a way to be physical good, and this is how you do it.
Well, and it's yeah, and also, the other part of that is, it's very clear that there is spiritual bad also. Wicked, and if wickedness a is a matter of the will, is a matter of choice, and not, for instance, a matter of ignorance, then spiritual evil, that the existence of a purely spiritual evil is a very clear conclusion from that, because if there is such thing as non-physical spirits, if there are creatures such as angels and demons, basically almost all they are is will. And if will is, and if wickedness, if evil is a matter of choice, then that their wills can be misled also, apparently in a different way than ours usually are. Although, I mean, and that's another thing, that not entirely different, because there's even among us there is simple physical evil. There is overindulgence in some kind of physical pleasure, but there is also the spiritual evil of pride and envy. I mean, that would be an evil of the will, regardless of the physicality of something. So
Right. And the early church did have when Gnosticism was a big deal, when it was a heresy that they were answering a whole lot. That was one of those big points of contention was, well, where does evil come from? Because Gnostics had it in the more Platonic sense, where it's the forms and the spirits are good, physical world is evil, and we're all just spirits that are trapped here, imprisoned in these fleshy bodies that we have, and we're stuck here. But yeah, when you have, like, say, Irenaeus writing against the Gnostics, and you have this very different biblical reality where matter's a good thing, that God made this on purpose, not as a punishment or a prison or some kind of accident, like the Gnostics had it, but as this is a very good thing. It's supposed to be this way. We've been given a gift with our physical bodies, not a punishment. And so you have our flesh being good in creation. You have our flesh being an object of salvation. That when we die and we're raised again, we're going to be raised with bodies. We're not just going to wandering spirits, but we're actually going to have flesh again, just perfect flesh that's not breaking down because of the fall, but but still having bodies, just as Christ still had a body after the resurrection. And you have all this goodness connected almost sacramentally to the physical world, where it's pointing us to God, it's delivering us to God, where the heavens declare God's glory, or you can see Christ. Thomas could put his finger into his hands, or his hand into his side, and feel that. And again, we can. It's matter. It's different than spirit, but it's supposed to be that way. And that's where, and so the line between good and evil, it doesn't rest on whether it's spirit or matter. It rests on whether it is in alignment with God's will or against God's will. Matter that's in line with God's will is great. It's a good thing, just like spirit is. But spirit that's against God's will is bad. Just as matter that would be against God's will is evil, not in itself, but again in that deviation, in that perversion of the original good creation.
Well, and it's again, in talking about the embodiment of the Christian faith, our most central practice of the faith, like one of the things that all Christians, do in some form or another. Like definitionally, Jesus didn't say, think about my death and resurrection. He didn't say, remember it. He said, eat this, drink this.
Yeah.
And like that is, like I said earlier, that is the one of the most embodied, that is one of the most material things you can do. And so, again, affirming, the goodness of his physical creation.
Yeah, baptism the
Yeah.
same way. You're pouring the water on. You actually, you feel that. You can see the baby cry when he feels it.
Exactly. And even with baptism, like, depending on your, particular faith tradition, whatever, like generally before there's some sort of conversion experience that would be more spiritual, but then you act it out in a physical, visual way. So you still have the two sides of that coming together.
So what was let me see.
Yeah, so just a little lighter tone. So like I'm just sort of imagining, like an angel watching, humans, like knowing everything that's going on and like, why are they doing these things? So like the ripe peach from the southern wall, an angel looking at that like, okay, it makes sense that a human would enjoy this. This plant, specifically created this fruit to be enjoyable as part of its life cycle. And then like full-bellied tankards, foamy topped. That's poison. Why are you drinking poison? Your senses are already so dull. Why are you dulling them more?
But yeah, and I'm actually this is also interesting to me because I'm actually also in the middle of reading through and I'm doing this is with a group a C.S. Lewis novel, which is That Hideous Strength. And I hadn't thought about this before, but it's actually part of the same thing. The villains of the book, the wicked people, the wicked men of the book, at least some of them, part of their goal, or what they think their goal is to to get beyond physical life, to attain to a purely mental and spiritual existence, and to rise above this physical this physicality. And God said no, that wasn't the plan, that wasn't the point, that's not what you're going to do. And attempting to do that is in itself a kind of corruption, is a kind of going wrong. And in a more simple day-to-day practical sense, there are mistakes we make because we get caught up in physicality, and there are purely there are very physical temptations and physical sins. There are other mistakes we make, and there are other sins that we commit because we have got caught up in abstractions, and because we have ignored the very basic physical realities of the world around us in favor of these big plans, and these ideas that fascinate us. And on the whole, if you look at their effect upon the greater world, it seems pretty obvious that that second type is the more dangerous one. There's rather less evil has been done, by people who are, simply pursuing, a base physical pleasure than by people pursuing an idea.
Yeah,
So.
and you have the good idea that's gonna, so important that any physical thing next to it just doesn't matter. which is how you get, the millions of people murdered for the sake of, whichever ideology you want to go with there. But yeah, it's that attack on physicality, and we see that a lot. And Lewis has that in That Hideous Strength. That's in the Screw Tape letters quite a bit as well. You can tell how much Screw Tape hates the physicality of humans. There's this contempt for it. I think it's in the last one where the subject finally dies and goes to heaven, and he sees the angels and he sees God.
Spoiler alert!
I'm sorry, it's an old book. Come on. Spoiler alert. Yeah. But he talks about in terms of, this animal begotten in a bed, gets to talk to God. This thing of mud and slime is getting to talk to these spirits before whom we have to cower. And throughout the entire thing, you just have this seething contempt for human physicality. But you see the same thing in, again, whether it's heresies like Gnosticism or the other ones that try to deny some kind of physicality, or again today when you have our own denials of physicality, where we do that in ridiculous ways these days. It doesn't matter. Your body doesn't matter. You're just a spirit that's inhabiting your body, and you can just change your skin like you're changing a coat of paint on your car, and it just doesn't matter. As opposed to that created reality, which God made us this way on purpose. This does matter. It's meaningful that we have these bodies.
Yeah, and I've never talked to someone who espousing that ideology enough to be able to sort out their thoughts on it. But it does kind of seem like transgender or transsexual ideology is a rejection of the body, is the rejection of the physical way where we're created. Inside I'm this, therefore obviously my body is some kind of mistake, and and the world should be made to conform to how I feel. And again, that's not that doesn't fit with the idea that God created us, that God created our bodies on purpose, and there is goodness in the physicality of our bodies itself.
Those that I have talked to, there's kind of the sense of, there's almost always a sense of alienation from people around them, from society at large or what have you. And for whatever reason, they for various reasons, they tend to attach that to their bodies, and they think that if they can just get rid of that, they'll sacrifice any of that just to have some kind of reconciliation on their terms, one way or another. And of course, there's as many different ways of doing that as our individuals, but it's, again, they've taken on that same lie that no, the body is evil. This is in your way. This is a prison. This is something you need to escape from in order to achieve true freedom. And somehow that's gonna solve all your problems. I think it's just a lie, just like it always is in every different thing we've been tempted with. Give this up, and you'll finally get what you're looking for. It's not what they're looking for. It never ends up that way, because it's not really where the problem is.
Chris, you were about to say something?
Yes. I lost it though, so just give me a second. Yes. So one thing though. Okay, so a lot of the poem, it's kind of like things that you can enjoy, and we're talking about how Christianity is very affirming of the goodness of physical creation and of having bodies, but also within Christianity and other religions as well, you also get some types of self-denial. And I recently heard someone talking about it in the context of Lent, saying that people approach Lent wrong whenever they're like, okay, what do I give up this year? Because it's this idea of you're just giving up something that you enjoy, like it's some sort of punishment. And they were saying the correct way to look at it is sort of an invitation, like you are going after, a closer relationship to Jesus. So you are just sacrificing something to get there. So the focus isn't on what fun thing do I lose, but there is this amazing thing. What am I willing to give up to get to it? And I just thought that was a very interesting way to look at it, because the way it's presented like, oh yes, this is just something that some Christians do to punish themselves so they feel guilty for no reason. But that's not the purpose of it. And if you approach it like that, even if you have this idea, oh, this is me getting closer to Jesus, then it's like, okay, well, Jesus just doesn't want me to have any fun.
Well, and it's and I believe this is there are a ton of things I've gotten from C.S. Lewis that I read a long time ago and I can no longer source, but I'm fairly sure they're him, and this is one of them that oh heck. And now I lost it. But that it's not that our desires are our physical desires. Buddhism basically says our physical desires are bad. They are leading you wrong. They are leading you wrong. And Christianity says no, your desires aren't bad. And it's not that you desire too much. In fact, the truth is that most of us, go wrong by settling for so little. And what we ought to want, what we ought to be pursuing is connection to the God who made us and who loves us and wants to be a very real and present part of our lives at every moment. But instead, what we end up distracting ourselves with is too many drinks or food or things that are so much lesser. And it's not that our desires are too strong, it's that our desires are far too weak. We are too easily distracted, too easily satisfied in the short term.
Yeah, that's kind of what mortification of the flesh is supposed to be about. Not just like, oh, flesh is bad, let's get rid of it and pretend it doesn't exist. But reminding you that no, there is more. That these even our desires, which they point to higher things. They point to greater things. And I think looking at it as we desire too little is a good way of looking at it. When I think about my kids, they if I tell them no, we can't do that, can't have ice cream right now. We'll have it later. But right now, let's do this other fun thing. Sometimes you just get so caught up in oh no, I can't. I need that ice cream. So I can't possibly have fun with anything else right now. But I think we all do that to a certain extent when it comes to our desires. That we want this, we want it now, we want it our way, and in that impatience and in that unfaithfulness, really, when it comes down to it, we forget the bigger things that those are supposed to be associated with, and even the bigger things that go beyond those desires. And that's it basically, man doesn't live by bread alone; he lives by every word that comes from the mouth of God, and that's what Christ said when he was fasting, when he was mortifying the flesh, as it were. And that's where the season of Lent comes from. That's what it's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be that reminder of there's more. Not that our bodies are evil, we need to escape them. Just that, no, we are our bodies, but we're more than our bodies too. There's more out there, and it's supposed to be pointing us to those greater realities, to the bigger things that we're supposed to desire, not just the little things.
So, I think I've said most of the things I really wanted to cover about this poem. Chris, was there anything else you wanted to say about this one?
No, I think we pretty much covered it.
Okay. Matt, any last thoughts from you on this poem or any of the subject matter we covered tonight?
I don't think so. I think all the stuff I really want to talk about, I think we covered one way or another.
Okay. Well, in that case, thank you both for joining me tonight, and God be with you.
Thanks for having me on.
Have a good one.